It's great to welcome back to the program Bill Scher, who is contributing editor to Politico Magazine, an ardent follower of American politics, as my audience knows, sometimes to their pleasure, sometimes to their displeasure. Always good to talk to you, Bill.
Great to talk to you too.
So, let's just start with the simplest questions first. Bernie, Biden, Warren, does anybody else have any shot at this point, either in a quantitatively defensible way or qualitatively?
Yes, I think this is right now a two-person race between Warren and Biden.
Really?
Bernie has had a pretty rough couple weeks. I mean,
Yes.
I don't think that his medical emergency means he can't be president. That's not my personal opinion, and I don't know if that is the reason why his numbers are down past couple of polls. But you really see him be in a much more of a firm third place position, whereas the last Quinnipiac poll was Warren 30, Biden 27. So they're the top two, and they represent clearly distinguished ideological positions in the party. However, I don't think either one of them is wholly secure. Biden, as we know, has had all sorts of problems. I think less ideological and more performance based.
Yes.
And if he continues to not seem sharp on the stump, he admitted he won't grow. I mean, he hasn't grown in the past several weeks. Warren has only recently established herself in the top tier, and she has not yet gotten the frontrunner treatment, and she will be tested. No one's going to give her a free pass to the nomination. And the last time she had a rough go of it was in 2018 with Trump calling her Pocahontas, and she responded with a DNA test, and that did not go well.
No.
Now, she may have learned since then, so I'm not saying it's a given she's going to stumble, but she has not been tested, and if she does not weather the test well, both of them could fade, and that opens up the race in a big way for all sorts of potential possibilities.
So one kind of polling question, and then we'll move on to some of the qualitative stuff. There are people who are writing to me all the time saying, okay, David, I believe Elizabeth Warren clearly has grown her support over the last 3 months. That's hard to deny. But you're still seeing polls where sometimes Biden is plus 12 and sometimes Warren is plus 4. Like something has to be wrong with some of these polls, right?
Well, yeah, they both can't be correct. I think I haven't gone into a deep dive and say, well, this methodology is X, this methodology is Y, and that's what the difference is.
Yeah.
I guess there's a degree of fluidity here. No one. I mean, I think both Biden and Warren have their diehards. I think they both have people who are sympathetic to both of them for different reasons. I think people are conflicted about who's most electable. They're conflicted about exactly how far can you go policy-wise and still be viable in a general election. So people might be toggling back and forth between the two, and it's not clearly delineated, moderates over here, progressives over here, and let's have it out. So it's not so shocking that there is some inconsistency in the polling, but I would say there is, over the scope of the national polling, they are all generally saying Biden, Warren in the top two, generally speaking, Warren having a slight edge at this moment.
When we look at the debates, and the dynamics of the debates, first of all, I've found them to be pretty disastrous. I thought debate number 3 was maybe the better one in that there was actually more time spent on one issue where you could maybe start to figure out which candidates are able to go beyond 3 talking points, 3 bullet points on a particular issue. There were like 45, 50 minutes spent on healthcare, et cetera. By and large, though, I think that these debates have been terrible, partially because of the moderation and partially because there's just too many people on the stage, including people who have no shot at this point. What do you think about the way the debates have been run and whether they can actually lead to better understanding of what the policy knowledge is of the candidates versus these, for the most part, pre-planned gotcha moments?
Well, I'm old enough to not be holding my breath for debate perfection.
Yes.
I mean, there's all sorts of questions I think should be asked. I think would get to the heart of the matter in a lot of ways, and they almost never get asked. But having said that, I think we're having a fairly robust debate about the ideological direction of the Democratic Party and the best strategy vis-a-vis confronting Trump. I mean, it's not like we can't tell the difference between Warren and Biden here. And if you don't like if you don't like something about either of those two, you do have other options. I mean, Kamala's had her moments, and Cory Booker has had his moments, and Buttigieg has had his moments. I mean, if you really like those people, you could be expressing your support for them. It's not like you can't find out who those people are. So I don't think we are confused about who these candidates are and what they stand for, number one. And number two, and this is maybe a bit of a separate point, there are people out there that always complain, oh, this takes too long. Why is there so much of this? Why can't we be like Britain and have a 2-week election? It is valuable to put these people through their paces. And I mean, you have a lot of people, you got a lot of different kind of questions to ask, a lot of different potentials for conflict between the different combos. And we're getting opportunities to see all of that in action over the course of the last several months. So I don't feel like we are in a position where we don't know what's going on. Like, we have a good sense of where these people are and where they stand and what they would do in a general election. And we got another probably 4 or 5 debates to go until we really make a final decision.
Yeah, we do. I guess my concern is on healthcare, for example. It would be really great to be able to, not in like a talking point, Julian Castro has something to attack Biden with, like to really dig into, okay, let's figure out what the end point would be of the approach that Joe Biden is proposing. Let's let Bernie talk to Elizabeth Warren about if she's open to Medicare for all, but not married to it, what specifically would be the alternative and what would be the effect on cost and act. You don't get that because you've got 10 people on stage and it's half talking points. That's, I guess, what I'm getting at, that there's no question that you can discern the general difference between where Biden is and where Warren is. You're 100% right. But there are really important questions that I would want asked on these issues that we're just not getting to because 12 people get a chance to talk.
Right. I mean, I think we have learned that there is a real difference of opinion within the Democratic Party between a public option approach and a Medicare for all approach.
Yes.
Going into this, people might have thought everyone was Medicare for all, and it's not.
No.
And that debate, I think, has been fairly robust, and it's actually had some impact on the numbers. I know a lot of your audience might be very hardcore Medicare for all, and I'm not saying you are wrong on the substance by making this point, but the numbers for Medicare for all have gone down. I think it was 5 points in the Kaiser tracking poll, which asked the question about public option, single payer approach every month. And I think that has something to do with the fact that some big names, Biden, Buttigieg, and others, have actually had a pretty forceful pushback on Medicare for all. Now, I think your point about the difference between Bernie and Warren on that score has not been very well explored. And that's not the moderator's fault or the debate structure's fault. The two of them have not wanted to go at it. The two of them have been fairly hesitant to really be pointed towards each other. Now, maybe that's different tonight. We saw Bernie take a bit of a swipe at Warren for being a capitalist on ABC on Sunday.
Yeah.
And now that he is clearly behind her, he has a certain incentive to draw those contrasts. And she has not been, I mean, her weakest element in her whole campaign has been answering the question about, would taxes go up on the middle class in your health care plan? And I don't think the argument, oh, well, there would be net savings, so who cares? Who cares of the tax question? I don't think that's sufficient. I think everybody knows it's not sufficient, except for her diehard supporters. And I would not be surprised if both people on her left, in Bernie, and on her right, press her on that, because people want to see the numbers and want to see your capability at defending the numbers. So there are people on the more moderate side that would say, if you can't make this case, maybe your argument is weak. And there are people on the Bernie side that say, hey, if you aren't going to really make this case, maybe you're not really committed to it.
Right.
And so I think that I would not be surprised if that, I mean, so I would bet the moderators would try to draw this out. What the candidates will do, I can't predict.
Well, I did a story early last week where I looked at the numbers of each candidate's the supporters of each candidate's second choice. And what those numbers suggest to me is that Bernie Sanders is not really going to be able to make up the gap by going after Biden, particularly because any damage he does to Biden, based on the Morning Consult poll, will sort of be evenly split between him and Elizabeth Warren. Biden voters like Warren slightly more than they like Bernie. So mathematically, and I'm not suggesting this become, a poop flinging whatever between Bernie and Warren, but mathematically, I don't know how Bernie recovers without directly trying to go after Warren's support. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a catch-22 for him. We haven't seen anyone go after Warren yet in a very concerted way. Buttigieg just kind of starting to, but everyone who's going after Biden has not reaped the benefits of that. Maybe Biden has been damaged in some way because of it, but Kamala, Gillibrand, Castro, Booker, none of those guys have really benefited by being pointed in their approach to Biden, and that has to weigh on Bernie. Is going after Warren in a very deliberate way. There's upside and downside risks to that. But I think you're also right. I mean, Warren has to stumble for Bernie to get back into the top tier. And he has to decide, does he force that issue, or does he hope somebody else forces that issue?
Foreign policy, I feel like, has been relatively absent from the conversation. There are criticisms of what Donald Trump has done and is doing vis-a-vis Russia, Ukraine, the Kurds, etc. And I've identified that foreign policy is also not Bernie nor Warren's strongest areas. So I'm wondering where you see the foreign policy discussion, whether you agree that when it gets into the details, Bernie and Warren don't do particularly well on foreign policy.
One of the surprises to me in this race so far is that Biden has not been able to play that card, because he's the only person on that stage with considerable foreign policy experience.
Right.
And I would have thought that would have created more of a stature gap on the debate stage. And granted, foreign policy rarely is the issue in a primary, not to mention a general. It hasn't been the topic of discussion in most of these debates, but it has come up. And when it has come up, Biden has not knocked it out of the park in a way, whereas I would say there are points when it was Hillary versus Bernie, when foreign policy came up, she was running circles around him. And that not the reason why he lost, but I think that definitely was not a help to him, that he seemed a bit out of his element in that regard. And this is not to say that it's an ideological point between being for military force or being a skeptical military force. I just think fluidity in language, depth of knowledge, that was exposed there. So long as Biden can't show, I know foreign policy 100 times better than these other folks, beyond that, it's kind of a wash. Unless somebody says something who really biffs it and seems like they really don't know what they're talking about.
I think this is part of Biden. I mean, aside from whether you ideologically like Biden's foreign policy ideas, which is a different issue, this is where I feel like Biden looks slowed down. As you've talked about the sort of optics of Biden during the debates, I would have imagined that on foreign policy, he would be making it very clear that he has both the experience and at least well staked out positions, even if you disagree with them. There's sort of a pattern that he has a worldview into which his policy ideas fit. The fact that he's failed to do that is, to me, one of the bigger signals that he just generally seems slowed down, is the best way that I can put it.
I mean, I wouldn't put it in those terms, but I totally get that people have that takeaway. And the more people have that takeaway, the harder it is for him. Now, I saw that video that the Trump folks push around when he's talking about how he twisted the arms in Ukraine to get rid of the prosecutor. And of course, that's being used to falsely assert that he did something untoward. And when I look at that video, I say, he looks strong. He looks sharp. He was executing foreign policy that was directed by both Obama and backed up by our international allies, and he got done what he set out to get done. And those are the kind of anecdotes that he could really use in a primary to show, I've been there, I've done it, and I've made things happen. And it wasn't like that was 10 years ago. That video, I think, was from a year ago. I mean, I have a hard time believing he has slowed down that much in a year, but the fact remains he hasn't come across that sharp in these debates on foreign policy and on other issues.
By what date do you believe it will be clear who the nominee is going to be?
Well, that's a little hard to say right now. So if you look at the early state polling, your CBS YouGov just had polls out this weekend where Iowa was a three-way tie. Biden and Warren at 22, Bernie at 21. Warren had the edge in New Hampshire, and Biden had the edge, a massive edge in South Carolina. We've seen much less polling in Nevada. I think the last thing I saw, maybe Warren had a bit of an edge there, but Biden was still in the mix. Now, Iowa and New Hampshire are almost completely white. very liberal, very college educated electorates. That is the Elizabeth Warren sweet spot. She needs to win at least one of those two. So those are not great states for Biden. If he and right now, the expectation setting on Biden has been lowered. So if he won one of those two, he'd be in fantastic shape going into South Carolina. So if Biden can win Iowa and he can win South Carolina, showing he could, which is a majority African-American state. It is a much more moderate conservative state electorally. If he could win there, I think he'd be very poised for a strong Super Tuesday, which is only a few days after South Carolina, and maybe even effectively wrap it up at that point. If Biden lost Iowa and New Hampshire, maybe Nevada too, and then won South Carolina, maybe you do okay on Super Tuesday, and you'd have a bit of a dogfight between him and Warren or him and Bernie or whoever won the other contest that could drag out till the end of the contest, which makes your convention very, very dicey because the superdelegates can't vote on the first ballot. And so you might not have a majority winner on the first ballot, and the supers come in on the second ballot, and then it's a broker convention. It's crazy town. The other option is somebody wins Iowa and New Hampshire. Warren looks like the most likely possibility at that point, and then that person runs the table Super Tuesday, and then you're basically done by March. That's the sort of the John Kerry model. What's different between now and 2004 is South Carolina did not have a standalone date in February in 2004, and South Carolina is demographically very distinct from Iowa and New Hampshire, a bit less so with Nevada. So we haven't had a situation where that dichotomy presents itself. We don't know how exactly that plays out Super Tuesday and beyond.
We will be watching it. We know Bill Scher will as well. He is a contributing editor to Politico Magazine. Bill, always a pleasure having you on.
Great to be here. Thanks so much.